Hey guys, how's it going? It's Al. Week 6 on DraftKings is finally here. Week 6 of NFL DFS. It's Friday afternoon, and you know what that means? It's time for me to sit down and talk with my Twitch chat, talking to them about their questions for the weekend slate, how they're going about building lineups, whether it's for cash games, whether it's for tournaments, whether it's for 3-max, whether it's for mass multi-entry. Decisions that we're going to make based on certain players, volume, things that have happened throughout the week. We're trying to still stay a little bit further back from the slate. We're not looking at like granular questions. We're not looking at exactly things like, you know, should I play this wide receiver or this wide receiver? Like we're trying to make the right decisions. In order to do that, we have to keep things a little bit broad on this show. Sunday morning, right before kickoff, the last 45 minutes for kickoff, I go live, and that's the place for all the 1v1 and 2v2 questions, last second questions to kind of finish off your lineup with those little fine strokes we try to paint with broader strokes on this Friday show. So thank you guys for being here. If you're new to the channel, click subscribe. Obviously ring that notifications bell. Looking for 10% likes on this video, just like every other video that we put out. You guys have been amazing in terms of the support with the likes on the channel, in terms of new subs on the channel. We have a higher percentage of our subs that have the notifications on than what is the range that YouTube expects. So thank you very much for ringing the notifications bell. And obviously you guys have been crushing it with the likes and the comments and everything else. So thank you very much. Let's bring in the chat, and I hope that you guys enjoy the video. How do I feel about Perrine with Gase saying he'll have a larger role? I think that he's fine. I don't think that he's going to get a ton of work. So how can I put this politically, you know, like as an analyst? Let me think. I think the best way to say this is Gase is an idiot. That's the most politically correct way that I could say this. He's an idiot. And so asking me to predict the moves of an idiot is going to be difficult, because an idiot's just going to do idiot things. You know, like what should he be doing? He should be trying to get this kid as much use as he can to find out what the franchise has in him, and get him touches and get him run and get him out there. Even if you're like, well, you know what, he's not good in the pass game or he's not good at pass blocking, then bring him in when you're going to run the ball. Make sure he's on the field. If you're an idiot, Frank Gore is very good. I have a ton of respect for Frank Gore and what he's done in his career. But the Jets are bad. And so running Frank Gore out there for 60, 70% of your snaps is what a bad coach and player development person would do. Finding out what you have in younger players is what a not an idiot would do. So I don't know. He's kind of been an idiot. I don't know how else to put that, or how to put it more gently. But that's just kind of where we're at. Thoughts on Humphreys at 4K and GPPs if Davis is not back? Sure. Yeah, we got to kind of look at this. Is the thing. So like with COVID-19 presenting us a lot of different problems with scheduling, presenting us a lot of different problems on these slates, with everything else that we have to look at, it leaves a lot of things up in the air. My best advice for you is to create if-then statements. I can't really speak to what, like I said, like I try to save that stuff for the Sunday morning show, and we have 99% of the actives and inactives for the day, and we can make those decisions. Right now, you want to set up your if-then statements. You know, if AJ Brown plays, and if Humphreys plays, and if Corey Davis does not play, we should know who's going to play the majority of the snaps at wide receiver. So if Corey Davis is in, then I like Adam Humphreys less. If Corey Davis is out, then I like him more. Set up your if-then statements and be kind of more set to go and prepared for the weekend. Who do I see as a couple good options in the mid-tier for wide receivers in cash? It's a good question. Let's go bring up DraftKings and take a look. So there's guys that we can look at that are really expensive. There's guys that are super cheap that I think are somewhat interesting, the most of which is probably going to be Jeff Smith. G Money, thank you very much for the Prime sub. 11 targets last week. 2 of them were end zone targets. Very boomer bust here for Jeff Smith. I don't think that you need to pile him into lineups, but like, he's super cheap. And there's other super cheap guys as well. So like the mid-range guys, let's say what, like 4K to 6K? We'll start at the low end. Greg Ward has seen a lot of targets. You know, what's that? 23 targets the last 3 weeks. We're still way up in the air on the Eagles. We don't know which wide receiver is going to be active or inactive that are clearly ahead of guys like Fulgham and Greg Ward on the depth chart. So again, set up your if-then statements if those guys play or if they don't. Miller is now the number 3 guy. Fulgham had the massive game last week. N'Keal Harry at 4,500 is interesting, even though I think that this is a game that potentially New England may not have to throw the ball as much if they are playing at home and playing from ahead. We have a lot of things up in the air for this game, including the game itself, with the Patriots canceling their practice today. So again, I've said this on previous weeks. We don't need to big brain this. And I'm sure somebody in the replies is going to say to me, well, what if the Patriots game against Denver doesn't play this weekend? And that's a valid question. And the answer is, don't play the players from this game if it's not on the slate. It's Friday. We're operating as if it is on the slate. If you're watching this video and it becomes canceled at some point, don't play them. So N'Keal Harry at 4,500 is fine for me, assuming the game plays. I like Valdez-Scantling more than most people, I think, because of the return of Adams, and I think that people are discounting him because of the return of Adams, saying, well, he's going to get less targets. But to me, quality of targets is going to improve as Adams is going to draw the most coverage and draw over the top coverage as well on his side of the field, and Scantling gets to deal with Aaron Rodgers picking spots to take shots. And if I'm playing him in tournaments, I think that that's kind of what I'm looking for out of him. We also have Deontay Johnson. We're going to have to make sure that he's active for this game. I think if he's active, he's somebody I'm going to be interested in just because of how many targets he gets. If he's out, then I'll start to look over to Claypool. Preston Williams in tournaments is fine with me. Probably not a cash game play at 4,700. There's a lot of players in this range that have warts, as you can tell, right? And it's interesting because this is the range that we've kind of lived in recently. And some of them are warts like Laviska Shenault because he's been injured all week, and then we don't know. We have to set up an if-then statement with DJ Chark. Jerry Jeudy could catch Gilmore, which is something that has been a negative for players, and he's not getting consistent high targets on a game-to-game basis, even though I think that he is very good. Terry McLaurin draws a very tough matchup in Bradbury, but Bradbury does not chase into the slot, and they do move Terry McLaurin into the slot. So there are ways for Washington to get him away from Bradbury if Bradbury does shadow him, because if he does shadow him, he won't chase him into the slot. So as far as that matchup is concerned, yes, it's something that is concerning to an extent, but also, like, people are going to point at, and this is where Bradbury is interesting, right? So, like, look at who the Giants have played. So let's look at this through this lens, right? Looking at who the Giants have played, and Bradbury's done a fantastic job at limiting receivers, the guys that he's been on, in terms of yards and catches. However, Dallas has like 4 dudes that can catch the ball. So, like, okay, you're gonna take Amari Cooper away. We still have Gallup, we still have Lamb, Schultz is still a thing, and we've got Ezekiel Elliott. The Rams, okay, you're gonna take one of our outside guys away. We're just gonna throw it to the other one. You know, we'll see where he is. We'll throw it to the path of least resistance, which is on the other side. And they also have somebody in the slot. So, like, every team that he has taken somebody away from, they have multiple other options to throw to. So you look at the pass yards that they've given up, 288 here, 327 here. There's paths to it if you have other guys to go to, or if you can get them away, get your wide receivers away from him. Same situation with AJ Brown, who could have Corey Davis coming back in this game, and Houston has a good enough cornerback that's done well, but he tends to do well against speed receivers, and AJ Brown, albeit a fast guy, is also a ridiculous matchup problem based on how big he is. So I'm not sure that you can just simply say, well, he's in a cornerback situation where this is a good cornerback and that cornerback's going to eliminate. He may make him a little bit more or a little bit less efficient, but you know, I don't really see it. A couple other guys in the mid-range. Jefferson in a GPP. Crowder has seen a ton of volume, even though he's playing less snaps and running less routes theoretically than somebody like Jeff Smith. His targets are so easily convertible into catches, and he gets ignored a lot because the price point is not super cheap. People don't see upside per se with a Jamison Crowder, but all he's done this year is produce 20 plus point DraftKings days. That doesn't mean that he's going to do that every single week, but if you give somebody like Jamison Crowder this many targets every single week, these are low ADOT targets, low average depth of targets. They're close to the line of scrimmage, which means that they are very easily convertible into catches, which also, when you couple with his skill set, which is able to pile up yards after the catch, you know, he's had a 35-yard catch, 52-yard catch, and a 69-yard catch in all 3 games that he's been active this year. So he's somebody who does have big playability that I think most don't give him credit for. And then I think you've got guys up here. Robbie Anderson also in a tough matchup in a pace down game against Chicago, but he's done very well. And I highlighted some stuff in Best Buys this week about him and how he does when Teddy Bridgewater is not pressured, and the Bears put the 7th least amount of pressure on opposing quarterbacks of all teams in the league, regardless of how good their offensive line is. As always, our Friday show is kind of brought to you by Establish the Run. You want to support the channels or support the websites that support the channel, there will be a link down below for you to click if you want to get some of the best content that is out there in the daily fantasy space. Articles on defensive line, offensive line mismatches from Brandon Thorne, Levitan's cheap volume, Thorman's rankings, Hermsmeyer's air yards by low model, as well as I was saying before, snaps and pace, which is a kind of a must read for me every single week and has been for years. So like you look at which teams are playing up in pace, which teams are playing slower, and you look at this Bears Carolina game as a game that's playing slower. So they may not get as many plays off as they normally get, the Bears and Panthers. So this is something that you're going to want to read. Obviously, if all the volume is funneled towards specific guys, that kind of takes, you know, the pace doesn't really matter. Like you're talking about 60 plays versus 70 plays, and a lot of those plays are still going to go to similar guys. What do I think about Jaire Alexander, Mike Evans matchup? I think that Mike Evans is a matchup problem for everybody except for Lattimore and the Saints, especially if Godwin's out. If Godwin's out, we're getting 10 targets for Mike Evans, and I just pile Mike Evans. Thoughts on Demont and Cash? My issue is playing 2 running backs from the same game in cash, although it's more viable if Montgomery is going to get 6+ targets every week. And we know that Mike Davis is getting 6+ targets every week. So it's possible for them to get there, and it's not as restrictive when you have that sort of usage in the passing game, but you are limiting your upside when you do stuff like that. So it does make it difficult. I'm probably not going to have very many, if any, lineups at all that have both of them, because that's just the way that I go about things. But I understand differentiating in tournaments, and it's more viable there. I'm probably not going to suggest doing that in cash because there's enough running backs out there at all these different price points that you can get your 65 touches for 21K or less. Montgomery is a great, high upside tournament play. D. Montgomery may be highly owned for a GPP, so do I just fade him? No, I don't do that. We've spoken about this before, and we'll bring it up again. It's not about one player's percent played. It's more about your cumulative lineup and how correlated your lineup can be. So you don't want to have like 220 total percent in your lineup when you add up all 9 spots. The number for the most likely winner of a millionaire maker has been sub 140 cumulative percentage points. And that allows you to play a few players that are 20+% in that one lineup. It's more about your correlation. The majority of winners of large field tournaments this year have been exactly the builds that we've discussed. A quarterback with a single or double stack on his team, a player on the other team to bring it back, and a secondary stack from an opposing game without a quarterback. It's kind of that simple. And those teams tend to have less than 140 cumulative percentage points when you add everything up. So I don't pay much attention to this player is going to be X% played this weekend, so therefore I must not play him. I look more at how do I go about building my entire roster for this tournament. Thoughts on Galladay and Hawk in cash? I like Galladay better than Hawk in cash. I think you can get similar usage from a cheaper tight end at numerous spots. Tim Patrick, thoughts? Meh. Is Cincinnati defense considered a punt now with how bad Phillip Rivers? Yes, they're definitely in play with how much Phillip Rivers, which is so weird, right? Like, Phillip Rivers was supposed to give them improved quarterback play this year, and he has not given them improved quarterback play. It's like the Revenge of the Sith, right? You're supposed to bring balance to the force. Like, he hasn't brought any balance. Cincinnati is able to get some pressure on the opposing quarterback. You see they've got 7 sacks in the last few weeks. They do have good defensive backs, at least 1 interception for the last 4 games. They're going to give up points, I think, as they kind of do every single week, right? That's not like they've allowed over 20 points every week except week 1 with the Tyrod-led Chargers. Every other week they've given up a bunch of points. But points against don't necessarily lead to defensive scoring. That's not what you should be focusing on. You should be focusing on how much the opposing team has to throw the ball and how turnover prone or how sack prone they can be with those increased pass attempts. And then if you're punting, I'm fine punting with the Bengals on defense. If you're just looking for salary relief to get in a little more volume or spend 700 more to get you to that prime lineup that you want, I think that if you're like up in this range, right, I think a lot of people are going to play the Giants defense at 32. I think a lot of people are going to focus on attacking the Jets here with the Dolphins at 2,900, who, in my opinion, are a good value and have been getting a lot of pressure on quarterbacks. And I'm ignoring this, and they should be playing from ahead, which is what we want. You want to force the opposing team. You don't want a team that's going to run the ball a ton. You want a team that's going to throw the ball a ton. The Vikings at 2,300, good amount of pressure on the quarterback. Know that Atlanta's going to drop back a ton, and I'm not concerned if they give up a bunch of points. I'm more concerned, can they put themselves in situations to create sacks that possibly lead to strip sacks or flat throws to the outside that can get jumped by a defensive back and turn into a pick six. That's what you should be focusing on with your defense selection, as opposed to just, well, the other team's only going to score like 13 points. Yeah, but like that may not be useful to you. Fitz, Gaskin, and Parker, too many Dolphins for one cash game lineup. I think this is going to be an interesting. I think that you're going to see some head-to-heads this week that have both Fitz and Gaskin. I don't think it's necessary to stack a quarterback in cash, right? I don't think you need to have a pass catcher stacked with your quarterback in cash. Now, a lot of times there is a quarterback who looks like he's going to be a really popular option, like Fitz, or like Stafford this week, I think is going to be a popular option in cash because of where he's at and expected outcomes, or Gardner Minshew, or guys in that range, right? I don't think you need to pair them in cash. You're just looking for a quarterback that's going to get you the possibility of 300 yards and multiple touchdowns to hopefully 4x their salary. And like, I don't know that you need to pair them. But also, if you have a running back on that team, like Gaskin, I think is too cheap. There's certain paths for him to get 15 fantasy points against the Jets defense at 5K. And Fitz should be like 64 to 6,600, and he's only 59. So if you're finding guys that are just underpriced and have a great opportunity to maybe 4x their salary at quarterback or 3x their salary at wide receiver or running back, I don't mind having both of them in the cash game lineup, but I don't force stacks in cash game. Based on 5 box running backs, who are the front runners for this week? I haven't really thought about it, but we can just go down the list, right? You can look at which guys are at home and favored, which guys have 20 touch expectation. So Madison would be one, right? Checks off every box. A little bit light on the pass game inclusion, but it's a matchup where teams tend to elevate their targets to their running backs in games against Atlanta. So there's a possibility that he may see 4 or 5 targets in this game. He should see minimum of 2 or 3, but definitely checks off all 4 of the other boxes. Derrick Henry checks off 4 of the 5 boxes. Not going to be really included in the pass game. 2 or 3 max targets here every single week, but there's no running back that has more of an opportunity at getting 150 yards and 2 touchdowns on any slate than Derrick Henry. I still think 7,300 is too cheap for him. On DraftKings, James Conner, same situation, just another week. Who else would be kind of along these lines? James Robinson. Don't know if he gets 20 touches, but 4 boxes for sure. Jonathan Taylor, I think, needs to get more work and just isn't. So he's not going to be somebody I can reasonably project for 20 touches, but he is getting the majority of the inside the 5 touches. Every touch that they give to the other 2 running backs on this team, like Wilkins and Hines, is a waste. Like every single carry that they give to those guys, in my opinion, is an absolute waste of time. And if Taylor is Trent Richardson 2.0, then just say you screwed up, you know? But even if he is Trent Richardson 2.0, and I don't think that he is, but even if he is, that is way better than the other running backs that they have, and you should just commit to that. And I think they're a better team when he's on the field and touching the ball than the other guys. So it's annoying. Gurley, no. Mixon, love the volume with Mixon, but doesn't check the other boxes. Jones would be one, I think. The question is, with Fournette returning, is he going to get his work cut into? Rational coaching would assume not much, right? So if you have Fournette on your roster, you're not just going to play him 0 snaps. He's clearly going to get some work, but I think that work takes away from like Vaughn, who should get nothing. Rojo has been, aside from the drops, Rojo has been too good this year to just say, we got Leonard Fournette back, so you're ripping off over 5 yards a touch. We're just not going to play you. That seems like a really bad idea. Rojo's been very good, and you just kind of, if you're a coach, I think you just got to live with the mistakes. Myles Gaskin, I do believe, is a $5 running back this week. This is a game that they should be playing from ahead. I'm not going to expect 22 carries. Okay? I'm not going to expect 22 carries, but high teens, 15 plus, is certainly in play, and he has not seen less than 4 targets in any game. So 20 touches is in play total. They are home. They are favored. He is the one that's getting the inside the 5 touches, especially with Howard, being not good. The question somebody asked earlier about Damian Harris, and my answer off stream, or not off stream, but off recording, kind of cheesed a couple people in chat off. I said, if you're rostering Damian Harris, just understand that you're rostering LeGarrette Blount. Okay? And you're rostering LeGarrette Blount on a team that has Cam Newton. So if you're okay with that, like, are there paths to him getting 18 or 20 fantasy points on DraftKings? Most certainly there are, right? They're home, they're favored, they should be playing from ahead. The defense has an offensive mismatch here where they could just dominate this young Denver offense. And if they are playing from there, they're going to run it a ton, and there's paths to him getting 20 to 22 carries in this game. But he could get very easily vultured inside the 5-yard line. He won't get used at all in the passing game, even though I think that he has that skill set. That's just not his job on this team. So just, again, know that you need him to score multiple touchdowns for him to smash in this game. I think 4K was too cheap for him. 5K is at the point where it kind of makes you a little bit uncomfortable. And the last guy, two guys possibly that we want to talk about here. Well, from a 5-box perspective, the last guy that we want to talk about is Devonta Freeman. And like at 4,900, like you got to kind of hold your nose and make this play if you want to against Washington, who's not great, and Devonta Freeman also not great. It's like the movable force against the resistible object, I guess. But he's only 4,900, projects to get a lot of touches, and at home they do use him in the pass game, and he gets inside the 5 carries. So if you believe that the Giants are going to score 25 plus points and win this game, then Devonta should be in play for you, at least in tournaments. And if you need the salary relief for cash games, sure, but I don't know that you need to go down to that route. And then I know that people have been asking a ton about Lindsey because Melvin Gordon, with the ticket that he got earlier this year, there might be some disciplinary actions. Apparently they said he's not practicing so far today on Wednesday from what a beat writer has, or sorry, on Friday from what a beat writer has said. If he does not play in this game, then yes, Philip Lindsay is certainly in play just for the amount of volume that he's going to get at 4,300. But I think there are better routes to go in cash games that will give us a really, really good floor with a possibly higher ceiling. Clearly you're going to be paying more money to get those guys, but there's so many plays between 5,500 and 7,300 that stuffing 3 of those guys in your cash game lineup to me seems like a better situation from a floor plus ceiling perspective, and still get a great lineup that you really like. So that's probably the route that I'm going to be going. If you want to play Philip Lindsay in cash, I'm not telling you that you can't. It's just, I think there are better ways. Doesn't Royce Freeman get action too? I mean, it's about percentages, right? So like, I don't think they're going to just go with one guy, right? Okay, Philip Lindsay or MG3, assuming MG3 is out, it's not like Philip Lindsay's going to get 100% of the running back snaps and 100% of the running back touches, but he probably is going to get 80 to 85% of them. Maybe, okay, sorry, maybe not that many. 70% plus of the running back touches should probably go to him, and maybe 25% are going to go to 20 or 25% are going to go to Freeman, which means, or to the, to the third string, right? And they're going to be playing from behind more than likely. And Freeman's not a pass game guy. So to me, saying that like, well, this other guy's going to get work too, is the look that people were making in week 5 with Kareem Hunt. Well, Kareem Hunt's not going to get 100% of the touches. Okay. Joe Mixon's not getting 100% of the third down carries or third down snaps for Cincinnati. Right, but he's getting 92% of them. And Gio's getting 16% the last 2 weeks, and 92 is greater than that. It's not, well, they're both going to play, so it's going to be 50-50 and you're screwed. No, one of them's going to play the vast majority of the time, and the other one's going to play a little bit. Right? No running back plays 100% of the snaps and gets 100% of the touches. The closest thing that we've seen to that in the last 3 years has been Christian McCaffrey, who's a massive outlier, right? Even Ezekiel Elliott, who is one of the highest volume running backs in the league, really only sees like 85% of the running back touches on his team. And he's still very good, and we don't worry about the guys that are behind him. Does Mixon's recent usage overcome the vomit factor? I mean, he was never a vomit-inducing back for me. He's just somebody that I could never buy into because of the way that they used him, right? And weeks 1 through 3 proved me right, where they did not commit to playing him over 60% of the snaps. They did not commit to getting him out there on long down and distance, third down, or 2-minute drill. As I said before, he was playing like, I gotta go find the exact number. I can find it for you. It's going to take me just a second. But like, he was playing way more the last 2 weeks. And I can't really put this up on the screen because it's got emails attached to it. But the numbers are this. Here's the exact numbers. Weeks 1 through 3, Joe Mixon played 60% of the snaps at running back. And Gio Bernard played 34.2%. Third down snaps, Mixon played 17.8% of the third downs, weeks 1 through 3. Gio Bernard played 66% of those snaps, 8 to 30. Targets, Joe Mixon had 6% of the target market share for that team, and 11% went to Gio Bernard. Now, the last 2 weeks, The last 2 weeks, weeks 4 and 5, Joe Mixon has played an 80% snap share versus 19% for Gio Bernard. Third down snap share, 92.6% for Joe Mixon, 25.9% for Gio Bernard. Some snaps, they're out there together. Both of them are on the field. And in terms of targets, Joe Mixon has seen 22% of the market share of targets the last 2 weeks for the Bengals. And Gio Bernard has seen 3% of the overall market share of targets. So if Joe Mixon is week 4 and 5 Joe Mixon moving forward every week for the rest of this season, I'm going to be playing an awful lot of Joe Mixon. And when you factor in that, well, Al, they're playing a really tough team, and you know they're playing a good defense, and there's a bad defensive line offensive line matchup for them. It's going to be a bad offensive line defensive line matchup for them every single week because their offensive line is trash. But even with that, right, Jacksonville, bad defensive line. Baltimore, really good defensive line. Against Jacksonville, he got a ceiling game because he had 3 touchdowns. Subtract the 18 points for those touchdowns, and you kind of have where he got on volume alone, right? 27 points is a lot of points on just volume. Against Baltimore, a game where they got slapped, right? Baltimore just took them behind the woodshed. They were getting shut out until they kicked the last-minute field goal in this game. He still got 30 touches and got about a little bit more than 0.5 fantasy points per touch. 15 fantasy points against one of the best defenses in the league in a massive matchup issue where his team scored 0 touchdowns. You give me 30 touches, I'm probably going to play that running back. He's only 6,200. Probably going to play some of that running back. I think he's cash game viable, but I think there are better routes that you could go at that similar price point. So I don't think he's going to be very owned in cash. I think he makes for a great tournament play. If the volume and the underlying volume that I mentioned before stays consistent from weeks 4 and 5, if that extends to week 6 and beyond, Joe Mixon is way too cheap at 6,200. Could Bird have a breakout game this weekend? I don't predict breakout games. I think Bird is too cheap at 3,500. I think that's the right answer. I don't try to predict, like, you know, I'm not going to look at Chase Claypool from last week. Like, you're never going to hear me say in the lead up to the game that Chase Claypool is going to have a 3 touchdown game or more this weekend. Like, that's not going to happen. Like Damiere Byrd, you know, you're just not going to hear me say that Damiere Byrd is somebody that's going to have a massive breakout game. I'm looking at underlying, I'm looking at volume, I'm looking at how they're using him, I'm looking at snaps, I'm looking at routes run, I'm looking at all those sorts of things. And I'm comparing that to the price that they have. Damiere Byrd is running a lot of routes for this team. Damiere Byrd has done well, but games against KC and games against Seattle, where they're playing from behind and forced to throw, he's going to be way more involved than games against Las Vegas, where they win by a bunch, and Miami, where they win by a bunch. So I might have some Damiere Byrd this week, but he's not going to be a core play for me because anytime the Patriots are at home and favored, I'm probably going to not have as many shares of the running or the wide receivers or the passing game as I would in games where they're going to have to score and play up in pace. And that could very theoretically bite me some weeks, and you know, and that's fine because you can't be right about everything every week, but I will be right more than I'm wrong focusing on the running game when they're going to be playing from ahead. Perriman at 41 stretching too far. We're waiting on a lot of injuries for the Jets, you know, so I can't give you what's going to happen with the Jets passing game, right? Like, they're expecting him to suit up is the latest news on Perriman. We know that Crowder is going to play. Berrios, who knows? Jeff Smith's been very good in terms of all the underlying stuff that I've been talking about. Running the most routes of anybody on the team. Had 2 end zone targets. He could have had a massive game against Arizona. He caught 3 of 11 balls that headed his way as opposed to 7 of 9 the week before. if his routes stay consistent, if his targets stay consistent, 20 targets in 2 weeks for a min salary guy on DraftKings is absurd. And if we believe that he is going to play a ton of snaps this week based on all these injuries, then we're probably going to focus in on him on Sunday morning. But we just don't know yet what the guys in front of him are going to be. If they have a full complement of wide receivers, I don't know if he continues to play that many snaps. But again, I can't predict the moves of an idiot, and Gase is Gase. Mims might be back too. That's what I'm saying. There's a lot of guys that when they're out and they can't play anyone else, Jeff Smith basically runs all the routes. Dalvin Cook officially ruled out. Okay, we knew that was coming. I'm interested to see how long Cook stays out. They have a bye week the week after, right? So it'll be interesting to see how long Madison is a viable play. Thoughts on Hooper as a bringback this week? Odell was not at the facility today. Yeah, because he's sick and he can't come back because of rules, even though he tested negative. I think he needs to get another negative test. Hooper's really cheap. Pittsburgh's a tough defense, but he's been getting a lot better volume the last 2 weeks. He's not somebody that I've thought a ton about. But you guys know that I do the Fantasy Focus Football podcast with Mike Clay and Daniel Dopp every Thursday. And so I think Mike Clay is a very sharp individual. And when Mike Clay says something that nobody else is saying, for those of you who are old like me, you understand like the old commercials, like, you know, when E.F. Hutton speaks, people listen. Those were commercials when I was a kid. If you don't get that, go look it up. You got required reading to find yourself an E.F. Hutton commercial from back in the day. Austin Hooper is Mike Clay's top value play at tight end this week. He said that in the pre-show, because we have to talk before the show, like we have a phone call every Wednesday. He's like, Austin Hooper's my number one value at tight end. Who's yours? And I went, really? Talk to me about him. So he talked to me about him. And Hooper is somebody that I've not been buying the first few weeks of the season, as you can see here, but clearly his volume has increased. We also have a situation where if Beckham Jr. does not play, where are the targets going to go? Right? We have to totally redo the market share targets on that team to kind of make it whole. There's 100% of targets that need to be allocated on a week in, week out basis. Odell Beckham Jr. takes up the most of those percentage points at like 25% of the market share of targets for that team. If he's gone, that clears up a lot of usage. Most of it's going to be soaked up probably by Landry and whichever wide receiver plays on the other side. But some of that's going to be soaked up by Austin Hooper and Kareem Hunt. So I think he's an interesting play this weekend and somebody that I am considering more now than I was probably on Monday. Who was mine? Trey Burton. Yeah, I think Burton's too cheap for these reasons. Okay. And again, this is underlying stuff, right? And I don't need to get into the exact specifics of all of it, but Trey Burton is 3,100, is playing the most snaps at tight end for the Colts, is running the most routes of all the tight ends on the Colts the last 2 weeks, has seen 5 and 6 targets the last 2 weeks. He's 3,100. And when he's on the field, he is running, or when he runs routes, he's being targeted on 31% of those routes. So that's like Kelsey Ertz levels, right? Routes run and targets, right? I'm not talking about routes per dropback. I'm talking about when he's out in the route, they actually target him. So like when they're running him out there, he's a primary target for Phillip Rivers. Then we have Mo Alley Cox at 4,000, who doesn't run any routes, plays the least snaps of all the 3 tight ends on the Colts. And when he's on the field, he's blocking 60% of the time, 55-60% of the time. Mo Alley Cox should be 3,100 and Trey Burton should be 4,000. Because you put Trey Burton at 4,000, now you've got Hooper here at 39 and you got Eric Ebron at 41, who I think is also a cash game viable play at tight end. I think these 3 guys in that range, if this was Trey Burton here, make sense from a pricing standpoint. So like, he's 1,000 less with very similar, with very similar target expectation, red zone inclusion, routes run, targets per routes run as well. So to me, he's just mispriced. Burton's a mispriced player. I totally agree with Mike about Hooper, especially if Beckham's out. Adams is matchup proof. Are you guys, I've missed chat for the last 30 seconds. You guys talking about Green Bay at this point, I assume? Or did I miss something else? Should you be afraid to play Claypool this week? I really don't want to chase. I see what he did there. So Chase Claypool is a fantastic prospect and is an NFL ready wide receiver, as we can see when he has been on the field so far this year. He's also still behind Deontay Johnson on the depth chart. So the games that he has had really good games have been games that Deontay Johnson left. If Johnson is out, then Claypool is good. If Johnson is in, Chase Claypool is very dangerous. He is GPP only. And yes, you're chasing the ball around the roulette wheel. The price is way up. The percent played is going to be way up. And path to routes and playing time is down if Deontay Johnson is healthy and playing. A-Rob or Galladay in cash. Cash game, you want to be a little bit price sensitive. If you can afford to get up to 7K for Allen Robinson, I think that he is a better play than Galladay, but he's 800 more. And that makes a big difference. So, okay, here, taking a look at the Browns. I'm going over to NFL Savant here because of the visual and kind of how you can see it. Odell Beckham Jr., 29.86 of the target market share. Jarvis Landry, 20%. Austin Hooper, 18%. 18% is very, very high for a tight end. 18% of the team's targets are very high for a tight end. They throw these four guys, basically, and Kareem Hunt's at 10%. And this percent is going to rise now because he's going to play more snaps. As we saw, he's playing 60+%, or getting 60+% of the running back rushes and playing like 75% of the running back snaps plus with Chubb on IR. So, and then we go down to red zone looks, and Odell Beckham Jr. has seen a massive amount, 41% of the red zone targets. If you take him out of this, all of a sudden Hunt, Hooper, Landry jump. So these are kind of the reasons why we're looking at Hooper this week, even with Beckham healthy and playing. If Beckham comes out and doesn't play, then clearly it becomes a different situation. Thank you guys for all the subs and the gifted subs and everything. Clearly, I don't always call them out on when we're doing YouTube videos, but thank you guys for the support. I do appreciate it. And if you're watching on YouTube, I'm live 6 days a week over on Twitch. Go check us out every single day except Saturday, and especially the 45 minutes right before lock every Sunday morning. How do I deal with the fact that on a normal week I can leverage high-owned running backs with his quarterback in the passing attack, but this week Thielen and Madison are both going to be massively played? Same with Henry and AJ Brown. I mean, it happens. Same thing happened last week with Robbie Anderson and Mike Davis. There's still other ones that you can, like, nobody's playing A-Rob. Like, it's just an exercise that you kind of have to think about, right? If you go look at different, whatever you're using, that, whatever site you're using probably has a column for what they think players' percentages are going to be. Whether it's on ETR, they have them. Whether it's on Fantasy Labs, they have them. Rotogrinders has them. Daily Roto, everybody, no matter what site, or if you're using any other site, I guarantee you that they're making a projection on the percent play that these guys are going to be. Every week, because of the pricing, there are 4 running backs that are going to be massively held positions by the field. And then there's like 5 or 6 others that are going to be sub 10%. Because all the play is concentrated on 3 or 4 guys. And it's mostly the cash game eligible guys. So it's not difficult to get leverage on the field by overplaying. So like I said, Joe Mixon, not a great matchup, not at home, but like if he gets 25 plus touches at 6.2K and he's less than 10% and very possibly 5%, if you play a lot of lineups, as I've advised you guys who are getting used to playing MME to play in the mini-max games at whatever level to try and work on your mass multi-entry skills, how hard is it to overweight the field by a factor of 3 or 4? If you think somebody's going to be 5% and you have 15 or 20% in your allocations, you're not blowing up all of your lineups, and you're also taking a massive position on the field versus those players. And players that I'm seeing on multiple sites that are in that range, Joe Mixon, less than 10%. Myles Gaskin, James Conner, Kareem Hunt, all around 10%. Devonta Freeman, less than 10%. Aaron Jones, less than around 10%. When I'm kind of aggregating multiple sites. Jonathan Taylor against Cincinnati should be playing from ahead. Not a great defense. Big offensive line, defensive line mismatch. What if Taylor's a hot hand and like, you know what? This kid's actually good. We should play the kid. All of a sudden, you've got 20% or 25% of a play that the field is at 10 or lower. That's how you leverage the field. You don't have to do it, you know. You don't have to have like 80% of a guy. Give a percent chance that Madison is a bust. I don't know how to qualify that for you. I think of things in terms of floors and ceilings and usage. And I try to simplify it. If you look at Dalvin Cook, okay? Take a look at Dalvin Cook, and he's averaging 24 fantasy points a game. I don't think Madison on this team getting Dalvin Cook usage is worse than Dalvin Cook, right? I think Dalvin Cook is a slightly more talented running back than Madison, which we had this discussion about running backs 100 times. So this team gives usage to its primary running back all the time. The fact that they weren't giving it to him in weeks 1 and 2 was shocking me, and he still got there because of how much volume he gets inside the 5. So this is Dalvin Cook the last 3 games. And then we look at Madison in relief last game. 20 touches in relief, ran for 5.6, got 3 targets, played 3 quarters, right? 2 to 3 quarters in that game. If you're going to project that he gets Dalvin Cook usage, which means 20 plus touches, some use in the passing game, the vast majority of the inside the 5 usage, what is your floor for a player like that? Against a team that's bad against opposing running backs. What is your I mean, we can ifs and buts, man. We can if and but every player. I don't like to get into the semantics. That's why I like to stick to what we know, which is volume. There's a path, there's a story that I can tell about every single game that's going to lead us down any other path to inject doubt or, you know, into any play or to pump up any play. Right? You know, if Derrick Henry, if they throw 2 screen passes to Derrick Henry and there's great blocking in front of him, he could have 100 yards receiving because he'll take those 60 yards to the house. That's a thing that could happen. It is, but what's the likelihood really? You know? And I've also made the argument that there's a path to Kirk Cousins ending the first half with 210 yards and 3 touchdown passes against this Atlanta defense. Right? That is a thing that could happen in a game with this matchup. But if that happens and they're playing from ahead, Madison's going to get a lot of run in the second half, and he's probably not going to have 0 touches in that 21 plus point first half either if we go down that path. And Madison can still have a very good game, assuming 20 touches in that scenario. So, like, I don't like going down the ifs and buts paths. And I really don't like going down the, the doubt infusing paths, not because I don't want to have the discussion, but because if we're just telling stories, I could tell any story I want. That's why I try and stick to volume. That's why I try and stick to underlying things like routes run, as opposed to just production from a receiver. I want to know how much are they on the field. So like when we look at plays like Zacchaeus last week that didn't work, it's not like it didn't work because we were wrong and they benched him. The ball didn't find its way to him. Just like the week before with Brandon Cooks, the ball just didn't find the way to him. And then the week after, the volume stayed the same and the ball did find the way to him. So I'm looking for guys that are going to be in scoring situations more often than other guys. And Madison is in that this week. Whether he has 12 fantasy points or 28 fantasy points, he should see 20 touches. They are favored and at home. He does have inclusion in the pass game. And outside of Ezekiel Elliott, I believe the most voluminous inside the 5 usage of any team running back scenario. Rank the cheap running backs for GPP darts. Perrine, Hines, Swift. Lindsey. You left D off the list. D, Lindsey. Should you be entering the same under 50 lineups in every MME tournament? Now, that's something that's interesting. I do that, yes. I understand that there is a way that other people do it. I enter the same 150 because I'm somewhat meticulous about the 150 that I enter in my allocations and combinations and everything else. So I want to get the same 150 in every tournament because I want to win a weekend of NFL. Because winning a weekend of NFL, if you have the absolute nuts on the weekend of NFL on one site, you're going to win like $1 to $1.5 million. That's the way it goes. If you're not playing the Millie Maker, you're going to win $200,000 to $500,000 if you have the nuts. It's a lot of money, right? Big multiple. Life-changing money. If you spread that out, what if you have the nuts, but you put it in like, a tournament with 20K to first, but you didn't put that in the Millionaire Maker, and you played a different 150 Millionaire Maker and you didn't win this. So like, I'm trying to win the whole damn thing, right? Like plan A in daily fantasy NFL for me is I want to win all the money. Life is all about how you deal with plan B. But plan A needs to be win all of the money. Now, for Showdown slates, this is something that collectively we've been working on in Discord. And if you're not in Discord, there's a link down below. Jump in Discord. There are subs-only channels. If you're a sub to Twitch, that's where most of the action is in terms of the chat being live 24 hours a day. There are non-sub channels if you guys want to go there and hang out. And I'll see if I can get some YouTube integration, maybe get a sub button on YouTube, and then we can work in some YouTube crowd into that as well. But I don't think that that's integratable at this point for my Discord. That being said, on Showdown slates, there's no chance to win all the money. So what I go for is typically I'll enter 150 in the first $10 tournament, then I'll enter another. I'll have the optimizer run me 151 through 300, so I get more variation. I'll enter that in the next one, maybe a third one as well. And people have been doing that with the mini-max games, like the 10-cent level, and saying, okay, $15 in the first one, another $15 in the second one, because there's no chance at like really at winning like $1.5 million on a Showdown slate, but you can win like 50 or 60 or 100 or 200K. So I want to spread my variance and try and bink a tournament, any tournament on a Showdown slate. So I view Showdowns differently from main slates. Main slates, I want to win all the money. And I think that that's the way to go. But I know that other people view it differently. And it's all about, salting to taste. Whatever you feel is the best way for you. Mooney will be very low owned for sure. Yeah, they play him a ton too. He's clearly the number 2 wide receiver on Chicago, and he's 3K. So like those are the 3 guys. We've talked about the 3 really cheap wide receivers that I like the most on this slate would be Jeff Smith, in no order, right? Like this is not in any order. I'm just thinking of them. Jeff Smith, Mooney, Bird would be the 3 guys that I'm most interested in sub 4K. And again, it's contextual. I'm not going to have like 60% of any of them across my allocations. I don't even think you need them for cash games this week. It's very easy to build very nice looking cash games with 65 plus touches from your running backs, 25 plus targets from your 3 wide receivers, 5 to 6 plus targets from any of the tight ends that you pick that are, somewhat cheap. Pats Broncos could move off the slate, everyone holding their breath. I mean, again, same thing. If they are off the slate, don't play them. Right? That's our look. That's what we're going to do, right? If they're off the slate, we're not going to play them. Back to Zacchaeus. I mean, I will if Julio's out. Any interest in Djax if he plays? I'd have to think about it. It depends on who else is back as well. Djax is a slate breaking guy, right? He always has the ability to win you a GPP. It's just picking the week that he does it. I don't think it's going to be difficult to overweight the field on him. So, and you guys know that I'm also not the guy that tries to play everyone, right? I don't want 1% of every player. That's stupid. I'm trying to strategically overweight the field on players that I think have a median and ceiling projection above what their percent played number is going to be. Montgomery and Davis in cash. We went over this already. I'm probably not going to go that route. I think they're both very good plays, and I'm probably not going to play them together in cash game lineups. Top cash wide receivers on FanDuel. Haven't thought about it. I haven't built my FanDuel cash game lineup yet. But let me take a look for you. It's going to take me a second to get here. Thoughts on Crowder? Already talked about him. Ton of volume. And I like players that get a ton of volume. Especially on DraftKings with, where volume matters way more than on FanDuel. So the question was top wide receiver on FanDuel or top wide receiver options. FanDuel, you don't it's always somebody between 5K and 75, right? 5K and 7,500 is kind of where you live in cash games, because you want to pay up for running backs because they have the most touchdown equity. I think Thielen's in play at 7,400. I like him better on. Okay, so because Galladay is 7,200 here versus Thielen at 74, I prefer Thielen at this price point. Allen Robinson is viable for me every single week just because of his targets, but look how much we can get for a little bit cheaper. So 6,500 AJ Brown, 6,500 Robbie Anderson. I understand the tough matchup there. There's all these guys down here that for T Higgins and the volumes that he's gotten for 5,500, and he's not going to draw their best cornerback. FanDuel in cash, we're looking for 2x the 1,000. So if he can get us 11 points, we're cooking. I don't know that you need a ton, on FD. You just don't. It's usually my cash game lineup has sub 7K. I guess if I show you this, it would work better. I'm looking at sub 7K guys for FanDuel cash, usually at wide receiver, because running backs are priced up there, right? Derrick Henry is 9K. It's way different from him being priced in the 7K range. Mike Davis up to 7,500 this week. Madison 7,000, I think is going to be extremely popular. Joe Mixon 69. There's Jones at 58 seems stupid low. Myles Gaskin 57 seems stupid low. I mean, if you want to go this route, if this is the way you're going to go, which is not the way that most people do their cash game lineup on FanDuel, they spend up at running back, then that's going to allow you to play any wide receivers that you want. At that point, yeah, you can afford Thielen, you can afford, if you go with Fuller and I don't know, Robbie or AJ Brown, whatever, you can still afford a ton. You have 7,000 left, including a defense. If you go cheap at running back on FD where you're getting 20 plus touches, great. But I think that nobody's going to go with two sub 6K guys. Is FD scoring fixed? I don't know. I think that they have it settled. The opinion that I got from them is that it was an issue with the stat provider. Their backup stat provider failed them as well. And they feel that they have it under control now. They just sent a message about NCAA. I didn't get that yet. Again, I'm on the air with you guys, so I don't know. So just understand that if, you know, it may still be down. How often should you be profiting in GPPs in order to tell if you're good or not? You need to be looking at what percentage of your lineups are in the top 1% consistently, what percentage of your lineups in the top 5% consistently, and are you over or underperforming the field? They just tweeted out, yeah, clearly I'm on the air with you guys, so I can't see everything. You want to talk about Hilton for cash? I didn't see it before. Sorry about that. Why? I'm not being rude when I say why, but why? I'm not trying to be rude. But like, but why? Because of price? I mean, maybe. Volume on the rise. Okay. We need to be careful when we say things like volume on the rise. Right? You saw a volume spike in a game that they lost. Right? Now, if he gets 9 or 10 targets again this week, then yes, then we can start to say volume on the rise. We can't really say it that his volume was on the rise in a week where they lost and were behind by a lot and he spiked volume. I'm torn. I'll look more into it. You know, I want predictable volume, and right now I don't think that he's extremely predictable. Right? I think that there's a lot of variance in his game right now. And maybe it's Rivers induced variance because he throws to running backs and tight ends more than he throws to anything else. We talk about top priced DK QBs. What do you like? Just you want to know about the expensive guys? Like what I think about the expensive guys? I like Lamar. I like Deshaun. I like Roethlisberger. I understand if you want to play Aaron Rodgers just to have like, I think Rodgers is fine from a tournament perspective to have PMR. There's only 2 late games this week, which sucks. I can't stand that. But that's what it is. You stated volume on the rise due to the ETR utilization article. I mean, like I said, I'm going to have to look into the underlying stuff. I'm going to have to look into his routes run. I'm going to have to look into all that sort of stuff. Because again, I think that that's one game where they were losing is tough for me to say, yes, it rose from last week. You saw twice the amount, but like also, why don't I like that? Why don't I like what? Why don't I like that his volume rose in a loss? Because it's a unique situation. Every game, relying on a 1 game sample size is bad. The 2 late games, because it's boring. 2 late games sucks. Every week there should be 4 or 5 late games. Every single week. There are 11 games on this slate. There should be 4 late games. 7 early, 4 late. Every single week. And one of the late games is Miami and the Jets. And the other one's Tampa Bay and Green Bay. So like, I think that stacking Tampa Green Bay is fun. To some extent, especially if Godwin's out, right? Especially if Godwin's out. Let's say Godwin's out. Brady's only 65. And we do this. And we do... Where's Evans? Come on, I can't find him. Find him! There. I do this. I do this. And... and we do this. I think we can make that work. That's a fun stack to have. That's a fun little game stack to have. I think that's plenty fun. And like, people are going to have a lot of Miami shares, but like not a ton based on projected percent played. And you look at all the percents of these guys, like most tournaments are going to be mostly over by the end of the morning. Godwin looks to be playing. We'll see. Don't know yet. Aaron said he thinks Godwin will return for the game. He thinks. Again, we'll see. Would I rather run naked Lamar or stack him? I always stack Lamar. Most weeks, if Lamar has a big game, 3-4 touchdowns, maybe at least 3 of those are coming through the air. Touchdowns are going to 2 guys on that team, Marquise Brown and Andrews, and that's where I want to stack with, is with those guys. Lamar running less too. He did last week. Interesting to see what's going to happen with him for the next 4 weeks, I think, is what we kind of need to look at, because he's been about 20 points per game so far through the first 4 weeks. He was 29 points a game last year. I think he's going to see a bounce much like Watson saw a bounce. And when he does bounce, it could be a massive bounce upward. Most games they've been winning handily, and they don't need to do things with him. And the one game that he could have had a big game was against Kansas City, and he was off that game and missed he missed 2 sure touchdowns, and Andrews dropped 1. So he could have had a massive 35-point Lamar game against Kansas City, and he didn't. Anyway, thank you guys for joining. I appreciate you being here. I'm sure that chat's got more questions. We're going to hang out after we finish this recording for a little bit, and I'll keep talking to them. But for those of you on YouTube, thank you for being here. Drop a like on the video, and I'll catch you next time. Look for another video right here.
He's a legend.